Hello, hello. Welcome once again to another edition of Quoth the Raven, Lewis Bright Raven. I'm your host, Lewis Bright Raven, 30-year veteran writer, illustrator, editor, and publisher of comic, science fiction, fantasy, horror, and role-playing games. And it is Friday, December 2nd. That means it's Friday night movie night or TV talk. Tonight's topic is 1973 classic science fiction thriller Westworld, starring Yul Brynner. I want to say Ryan Benjamin, but it's it's not Ryan Benjamin.
Richard Benjamin.
Richard Benjamin. Thank you. And James Brolin. And of course, with me, my guest, host on Fridays, John Norris. Figaro.
I hope you're doing well. Hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving.
Yeah, well, we didn't, but that's par for the course. I don't know who all's watching, but we'll see. Hopefully, our friends that are usually watching will say hello. But this was an interesting experience, wasn't it? When we started doing research on this one.
Yes.
Originally, we had planned on watching this on Tubi, and Tubi didn't have it. They had the sequel to this, Future World, which I ended up watching as well, but I didn't ask John to because I was like, nah. But because I didn't know what was going to happen with that. But anyway.
Fortunately, I have it on Blu-ray, so.
Well, you have two. Yeah, you had it on Blu-ray. I had to go get it from the local library.
Yeah.
So, difference did you get the full extended edition on the Blu-ray, or just the regular edition? Because there is an extended edition to the film.
There's only one cut of the film on this Blu-ray, so I'm assuming it's the
regular
theatrical version.
Okay, cool. Alrighty then. Let's see what we got here. Westworld 1973, written and directed by Michael Crichton. Produced by Paul N. Lazarus III. Lazarus Pit. Starring Yul Brynner, Richard Benjamin, James Brolin, Dick Van Patten, Majel Barrett, Alan Oppenheimer, and more in the cast of characters that are like barely there, but they're there. Production company and distributed by Metro Goldwyn Mayer. Released date of August 17th, 1973. The theatrical running time was 1 hour and 28 minutes, but there is an extended version that runs an hour and 35 minutes. There's a budget of $1.2 million. They made a box office in 1973 of $10 million. Note that the theatrical poster displayed here was designed by the late, great Neil Adams, the beloved comics artist.
And I just found that out today, like minutes before coming on.
So yeah. And did you notice the misspelling of the word wrong on the poster?
I did.
Okay.
I wondered if that was intentional or not.
Yeah, it's intentional. So
And it should be said that Alan Oppenheimer is best known as the voice of Skeletor on He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
Yes,
So,
but we'll get him. We'll talk more about that in a moment. What it's about. In 1983, now remember this film was made in 73, but 10 years in the future from when it was made, a high-tech, highly realistic adult amusement park called Delos features three themed worlds: Western World, the old American West, Old West. There we go. Medieval World, Medieval Europe, and Roman World, which is the ancient Roman city of Pompeii. The resort's three worlds are populated by lifelike androids that are practically indistinguishable from human beings, each programmed in character for their historical environment. Now, keep in mind, at this time in the 70s, Disney had technology at Disney World that was animatronics, and all Crichton was doing was extrapolating on where that could go in the next 10, 15 years. It still hasn't happened yet, but we're getting there. Anyway, for $1,000 a day, guests may indulge in any adventure with the android population of the park, including sexual encounters and a simulated fight to the death. Daedalus' tagline and its advertising promises, "Boy, have we got a vacation for you." Peter Martin, played by Ryan Benjamin. See, I wrote him down as Ryan Benjamin, Sir Richard Benjamin there again. Sorry about that. Ryan Benjamin's a comic artist. That's why he always comes to my brain there. Anyway, a first-time Delos visitor and his friend John Blaine, played by James Brolin, who's on a repeat visit, go to Westworld. One of the main attractions in Westworld is the Gunslinger, played by Yul Brynner, an android programmed to instigate gunfights. The firearms issued to the park guests have temperature sensors that prevent them from shooting anything with a high body temperature, such as humans, but allow them to shoot and kill the cold-blooded androids. Gunslinger's programming also allows guests to draw their guns and kill it, with the android always returning the next day for another duel. The technicians running Delos notice problems beginning to spread like an infection among the androids. The androids in Roman and medieval world have begun experiencing an increasing number of breakdowns and systemic failures, which are said to have begun to spread to Westworld. When one of the supervising computer scientists scoffs at the analogy of an infectious disease, he is told by the chief supervisor, played by Alan Oppenheimer, Skeletor, "We aren't dealing with ordinary machines here. These are highly complicated pieces of equipment, almost as complicated as living organisms. In some cases, they've been designed by other computers, and we don't know exactly how they work." That's not a good thing, is it?
Nope.
After a night spent with a robotic, and we put that in question marks because it's hinted that they might be, but then they don't really know. They don't spell it out for anybody. Mostly because how would that work anyway? Anyway, robotic prostitute. Blaine is accosted by the gunslinger whom Martin killed in the saloon the previous day. Martin then comes and breaks down the door and breaks into the room and once again shoots the gunslinger, who flies out the window and dies. Martin is then jailed for shooting the gunslinger dead and is awaiting trial. So Blaine breaks them out and two of them head out of town, including Blaine shooting the android sheriff dead. A banker, who has come to be a guest, played by Dick Van Patten, then requests and is made to be the sheriff, which seems kind of odd. Does it not to you?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I don't know. It's kind of weird. Anyway, the malfunctions become more serious when a robotic rattlesnake bites Blaine in Westworld. This is a very confusing scene. If the robot snake bit him and it's real, then he should have been poisoned by venom, but there's no sign of that in the storyline. And if it's a robot, then the construction of the snake should have been done a lot more damage to his arm than what is shown in the film. Just my opinion. Anyway, cut to medieval world, where a female android refuses a guest's advances. The failures escalate until Medieval World's Black Knight android kills a guest, the one who was spurned by the female android, which is kind of it's kind of an interesting dichotomy. Both the guest hold on a second. Okay, never mind. Both the guest that was rejected by the female android and Blaine get injured, and it's kind of like a tell of who's going to get killed later in film. Anyway, the guy gets killed by the Black Knight android gets killed in the sword fight. The resort supervisors then try to regain control by shutting down the power to the park, but the shutdown traps them in their central control room when the doors automatically lock. Unable to turn the power back on, their oxygen is getting depleted and running out inside the room. They're not smart enough to have anything to break the doors open either. Meanwhile, the androids in all three worlds are running amok, operating on reserve power. Martin and Blaine, who have recovered from a drunken barroom brawl, wake up in Westworld's brothel unaware of the park's breakdown. When the gunslinger challenges the men to a showdown, Blaine treats the confrontation as another amusement, but the android shoots and kills him. Martin then runs for his life, and the android implacably follows. And this is probably the best part of it, because it's like the android just won't stop. Martin flees to the other areas of the park, but finds only dead guests, damaged androids, and a panicked technician attempting to escape Delos, who is soon shot and killed by the gunslinger. Martin climbs down through a manhole in Roman World into the underground control complex and discovers the resort's computer technicians in the room that they were trapped in. Only they've suffocated when the ventilation system has been shut down. It seems to me if you shut the park down, you don't still shut down your own underground systems. I don't know. That was kind of a weird thing. Anyway, the gunslinger stalks him through these underground corridors, so he runs away until he finds the android repair laboratory, where he finds acid and some other things. And he was told by the guy, the technician was trying to escape, that the only way to stop the gunslinger would be with like dousing him in acid or something to that effect. So when the gunslinger enters the room, Martin pretends to be an android, which shouldn't have fooled the gunslinger, but it does just enough so that he can throw acid into the gunslinger's face and flee the room while he returns to the surface inside the Medieval World castle. But this does not stop the gunslinger, who shortly follows him after. With his optical inputs damaged by the acid, the gunslinger is unable to track Martin visually and tries to find Martin using its infrared scanners and sonar listening system. Martin stands beneath the flaming torches of the Great Hall in the Medieval World Castle to mask his presence from the android before setting it on fire with one of the torches. Thinking that this has finally killed the android, Martin tries to find his way out when he hears a call in the dungeon and finds a chained woman begging for help. He gives her water, but this causes her to short circuit and shut down. Martin is shocked because he didn't realize that she was a robot. As he's trying to recover from that shock, suddenly the burned shell of the gunslinger attacks him once again on the dungeon steps before finally succumbing to the damage it has sustained. The movie ends with Martin sitting in the dungeon steps in a state of near exhaustion and shock, as the memory of the company's marketing slogan resonates inside his mind. Boy, have we got a vacation for you. Now, as I said, we were originally trying to watch this on Tubi, but we can only find Future World. And I thought it was the same film because the opening of both films is almost identical. So that's why I was a little bit upset when I saw Future World the first time on Tubi. But anyway, just to give you guys a quick rundown. Future World is a sequel to Westworld. And despite what happens in this film, the owners of Delos were able to cover up the deaths of 45 guests and over 50 employees from this event that takes place in this film and remain open. And Delos is now using their technology to clone the guests that come in the second film. And 2 reporters have to uncover and expose it. That's basically what the Future World is. All right. Additional notes. In a novelization of the film, Crichton explained how he re-edited the first cut of the movie because he was depressed by how long and boring it was. That's his words, not ours. Scenes that were deleted from the rough cut include the bank robbery, which is why Martin and John go with the prostitutes in the movie instead of going for the bank robbery scene. And you say, oh, no, that never mind, don't worry about the bank robbery. You hear all the gunshots during that whole sequence. It's because they actually were supposed to shoot that and have things go on with the bank robbery, but I guess it was just not good enough or whatever, and they cut it from the film. They cut sales room sequences, the hovercraft that was flying above the desert, which they don't show hardly anything out at the beginning of the film. Some guests that are killed, including a scene where a guest is tied on a rack and is killed when his arms are ripped out from the torture rack, and a longer chase scene between the gunslinger and Martin, and one where the gunslinger cleans his face with water, cleans the acid off of his face. But it just didn't work, I guess. So Crichton's different cut featured a different ending, which included the fight between Gunslinger and Martin and an alternate death scene in which somehow the gunslinger is killed on the stretching rack, which I don't know how he could have gotten him knocked out enough to do that. But it would have been interesting to see Yul Brynner standing there not really making a sound until his arms rip out and then maybe scream and squelch. That would have been interesting. But the film was completed on time, so MGM authorized the shooting of extra footage, and a television commercial to open the film was added. But because there was a writer's strike in Hollywood at the time, Crichton was not available, and they hired Stephen Frankfurt, a New York advertising executive, to write that scene. I'll let you go ahead from here.
All right. So Westworld was the first feature film to use digital image processing. Crichton originally went to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, but after learning that 2 minutes of animation would take 9 months and cost $200,000, he contacted John Whitney Sr., who in turn recommended his son, John Whitney Jr. The latter went to Information International Incorporated, where they could work at night and complete the animation faster and cheaper. Whitney Jr. digitally processed motion picture photography at Information International to appear pixelized to portray the gunslinger android's point of view. The approximately 2 minutes and 31 seconds worth of scenographic block portraiture was accomplished by color separating, which is 3 basic color separations plus black mask, each frame of source 70 millimeter film images, scanning each of these elements to convert into rectangular blocks, then adding basic color according to the tone values developed. The resulting coarse pixel matrix was outputted back to film.
Now, when we talk about the color separating, think CMYK, cyan, yellow, magenta, and black. That's what they're talking about when we talk about color separating there.
The process was covered in the American Cinematographer article Behind the Scenes of Westworld and in a 2013 New Yorker online article.
Okay, what did I think of this film? Well, the first thing that really stuck with me is how much a young James Brolin and Christian Bale look alike. It made me wonder why they didn't try to remake this movie while Crichton was still alive, with Bale in the role of John and someone else like Jason Statham or Ed Harris as the gunslinger back in 2002, when they were starting to talk about what eventually became the current Westworld TV series, which didn't launch until 5 years after Crichton's death. The second thing that made me stop and think when I was watching this was Richard Benjamin in the lead role, so to speak, as Peter Martin. Keep in mind he played Adam Quark a few years later on the NBC series Quark in '78, which we have talked about on this show before several months ago. So I was like, kind of like, this is weird. See, it was, I don't know if I call it was distracting, but it was certainly stuff that was in my mind as I was watching the film. Unfortunately, the film was not what I remembered. For some reason, I thought Brolin's character was the hero who was chased and not Benjamin. But it was obvious when Brolin got snake bit that he was going to die. Because like I mentioned earlier in the plot discussion, why wasn't he, he was snake bit by a rattlesnake. Why wasn't there venom, for one thing? And also, like I said, the other guest that was injured, so to speak, and rejected by the girl, both of them were what's the word I'm trying to think of? Foreshadowing for both of those characters getting killed. And of course, those are the two who do get killed. Major Barrett, as the proprietor of the whorehouse, was not what I expected. And Dick Van Patten and his role were nice ensemble parts for them, but I had not remembered them being in the film originally. So now that I'm older and I recognize who they are and everything, it was like, oh, that's a nice touch to have them in there. I do wish I knew what happened to the banker character, because they never tell you, they don't show you what happens to that character. But once he was made sheriff, one would think that he got killed, but it would have been interesting to see it. Story-wise, I do wish that there were some more explanations of some of the other characters that were going on in other parts of the resort. And I do wish that Peter Martin had found a crossbow in Medieval World and shot the gunslinger in the chest. Because then he could have just walked around with the arrow in his chest the whole time. and it still would have fit the Western motif in a way, because it had been, cowboys and Indians, even though it was medieval. It would just, it would have been interesting if they'd done that. But anyway, what were some of your thoughts?
Well, I first of all, I'd heard it's kind of a miracle that the film turned out as good as it did, because in my research today, so of course this was Michael Crichton's theatrical directorial debut, and I've read that he didn't want to do a science fiction film for his debut, I guess, because he was, so associated with that genre that he wanted to try something else. But he said that was the only way that the studio would let him direct this movie. And the only reason that it was made at MGM was because they were literally the only studio that said yes to it. And MGM at the time had a bad reputation among filmmakers, because there were a lot of directors that very openly complained about how they were treated there. And basically it was a lot of studio interference.
Yeah.
Like a lot of studio interference. And even though Crichton said, they were good about not doing that to him as much, they still demanded a lot of script changes. I read that Richard Benjamin and Josh Brolin were cast literally 48 hours before shooting was supposed to start. And Crichton said he had no control over casting whatsoever. And of course, they were given a limited budget.
Right. Originally, it was under 1 million, but they did increase it.
But I really like this film, and I gave it a 4.5 stars. I do agree that story wise there were some questions like that we talked about, but the performances, I mean, with all the stuff we talked about, like, it's a very good first feature for him. It really is, and the performances from the three leads, I think, are really good, especially Yul Brynner, and of course, Yul Brynner's character was an homage to the character he played in the movie The Magnificent Seven.
Correct.
And of course, I had seen both movies before, but this week I actually watched both movies back to back. And it's really interesting to do that and see Yul Brynner play both sides of the coin. And I think it's really a testament to his skills as an actor that, it's the same actor and the exact same costume in both films, and yet he plays those two characters completely differently, to the point that there's no trace of the Magnificent Seven in Westworld, despite him wearing the very same outfit that he wore in that film. But when Yul Brynner's on screen, he utterly dominates every scene he's in. It's like you really, like, I find I can't take my eyes off him when he's on screen. He just really has that presence and just that stare. And so, we've talked about, some story issues and how, we wish certain things had been a little better developed. But once you have the scene with the three leads where James Brolin gets killed, it's like the film really finds its footing from then on out, I think. And that scene is, I think, my favorite scene in the film, because all three of those actors just play it to perfection. And and when you see the gunslinger, because this is the first time he's actually fulfilled his programming and actually killed a guest in the park, you see that grin. It's
not even really a grin; it's more like a smirk.
Yeah. It's and then James Brolin, slowly realizing what's happened and that the robot killed him, and then Richard Benjamin, gradually realizing that he's in trouble, and they all three play that scene so well.
And it just keeps getting better as that progresses, because there's a scene where, I don't know how far away he's supposed to be, but he shoots Peter Martin's hat off his head from like a long distance with a rifle.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, he shoots the head off, but doesn't shoot him in the head. That's whoa, and then there's other things that Martin does that are so silly. Like, he tries to plan an ambush, which doesn't work, so he leaves his gun behind. I didn't think that he should have left his gun behind, but he did. Okay, fine. it was just kind of interesting that was going on. You would think, I mean, we already know the gunslinger is supposed to lose every gun battle. So why wouldn't he just load his pistol with blanks? I guess he has to shoot some of the other robots now and then, which they never did a scene of that. That would have come.
Yeah.
But that was the kind of thing I was always wondering about, little things like that. But that's just me being story conscious, I guess. But it was just interesting how they did that. I also liked how they did Yul Brynner's eyes in post effects. People ask if he was doing wearing contacts because there's this shine reflectiveness on it, and no, that's actually alternate stuff that went in with the pixelation over the eyes throughout. Apparently. So again, that was the post effects of digital effects computer work there. So that was an interesting side of it as well. And it was interesting because he was the only one that I really remembered noticing having that. Now, of course, part of that was because they changed his optics or whatever to see infrared and other things going on. But I would have liked to have seen that as another sign of how to tell who was and who wasn't an android.
Actually, I think they did do that in one other scene, and it's the scene where I think it's Blaine is in bed with the prostitute, and for a second, after he's in bed, they show her face, and she does have this stare and that glare in her eye, and they do like a kind of synthesizer-y sound effect to make it clear that she's a robot. So they do that like one other time.
Okay.
In film.
I must have missed that. Okay, that's fair. All right. So you gave it 4.5. I gave it 4. I still enjoyed the film, despite the flaws of the story. Like I said, I still think they need to make a remake of this film, and they need to cast Christian Bale in the role that James Brolin was in. I mean, look at this for a second. It's James Brolin on the left and Christian Bale on the right.
Yeah.
Even James Brolin's actual son has commented about this, saying, is he related to me and I just don't know it? They know they're not, but it's just funny that they look that similar,
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, I don't know. I could love to see that played that way, but yeah, it's an interesting film. Okay, next time, unless you got something else to add.
No, like I said, I mean, there's story stuff you can that you can nitpick about, but it's really for me it's really the performances of Yul Brynner and Richard Benjamin, and especially Yul Brynner that carries this film.
Okay, I think I agree with that. Again, 4.5 from John, 4 stars out of 5 from me. Next time, I'll be our favorite Christmas films. What will make the cut? We're not sure. We don't know if we're going to do full-length films or shorts or what we're going to come up with, but we'll come up with a list. And we'll be back on Friday next week to talk about that. So, whoops, it did that again. I hate when it does that. I appreciate you always for watching. If you like this video or you think others might, hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons to continue to get content from my channel. As always, I thank you for watching and for your support. Reach out to me on social media, Facebook, Lewis.BrightRaven. I don't do a whole lot on Twitter, but it's at LewisBrightRave2. You can see some of my artwork at deviantart.com/BrightRaven. You've been watching Quoth the Raven, Lewis BrightRaven, exclusively on YouTube. Questions, comments, suggestions for other films to discuss in the future. Quoth the Raven LBR72 at gmail.com is the address to reach out to me at. If I'll get back to you in a day or two, try LewisBrightRaven at yahoo.com. If you want to reach out to talk to John, he's on Facebook at John Norris, and his email is Gray, Grey, Figaro, Figaro, at hotmail.com.
Correct.
That's all for now, folks. We appreciate you watching. We'll see you next time.
Have a good night, everyone. Oh, darn, I saw North Free just came in at the last minute there.